The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh, Cheryl Hentz, and usually once or twice a year we try and do shows on consumer tips and consumerism, that type of thing, and with the holiday gift buying knocking on our doorstep and staring us in the face, I thought this might be a good time to do it. So joining us tonight to talk about how to protect yourself during the gift buying season is Jo Ellen Wollangk. She is a regional manager with the Wisconsin Better Business Bureau, and thanks for coming in. We appreciate it very much.
Anytime we can help educate the public, we are pleased to do that.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. And I must say, if you're a watcher of this show, you know that in the past we've generally had on someone from the Department of Consumer Protection. And I want to just say at the outset, they have had some changes at the state level, some cutbacks and so forth, and unfortunately it's going to affect the consumer because they've done away with all their regional offices. The people who have been on this show in the past from their office are now working in different positions within the state government. They no longer have consumer protection jobs and phone numbers for the Consumer Protection Office. If you try calling them, you get caught up in this messaging system that leads you essentially nowhere. It's a nightmare, and I understand from people I've spoken to that even filing a complaint will take up to a month, maybe longer, in many cases to get resolved. So unfortunately, while I understand cutbacks and budgets being tight and so forth, this is going to, I think, dramatically impact and affect consumers. So if you have a voice on that you want heard, I would suggest contacting Governor-elect Scott Walker and your local representatives at the state level. So now that I've got that out of the way, that sort of explains why you're here.
Right.
And actually one of the guys who has been here in the past from Consumer Protection hooked us up together.
Yes.
So I want to thank Ed for that. So, but anyway, let's talk about holiday shopping because that's what we're all doing right now.
That's right.
I don't know where you want to start, but I know a lot of people. We just this past Monday celebrated, if you want to call it a celebration, Cyber Monday.
That's right.
Where a lot of people do online shopping. I will admit I've done it for years. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot easier. Right. But there's ways to do it safely, and there's ways that aren't so safe.
Right.
So share some of those with us.
Cyber Monday, they predicted, and this was before it happened, and I think it came true, is that they jumped the number of people who used the internet for shopping, something like 20%. It was 95 million people that were expected to shop, and they did get that. So it's huge. It's convenient and it's easy, but there are some real problems with it. You're not always sure you're working with a company you know. When you go into a store in Oshkosh, you know who you're dealing with. But whether you're in the store or on the internet, make sure you know what the return policies are for the company. If you have to return something, if it's a store in town and it's a store that is around long term, not something that comes into the mall for the month of December or whatever, you know where you can take it back, and it's simple to take it back. On the internet, that's not always so easy. So make sure you know who you're shopping with, and if the appeal, if the email message on some great deal comes to you, even if it looks like it's Walmart or Sears or something that's very familiar, double check, hover over that URL or that click-through link and make sure that it really is what it is, because the actual click-through link will show up in a little shadow box next to it. So, so kind of make sure you're going places you know you're going, so that you don't invite viruses in and all that kind of thing. And make sure that you know who you're working with before you give any credit card information to protect yourself that way too.
Sure.
When it comes to the credit cards, you are much better off using a credit card than you are using a debit card. Some debit cards do have protections, but credit cards are required to have protections. If a scammer, which is a thief, I mean, you know, it sounds kind of mild to say scammer, but they're thieves.
Yeah.
If they get your debit card number, they get access right to your bank account, and they can in fact clean it out. So make sure that you give them a credit card number where there's a maximum liability of $50.
Okay.
Also, check your online statements regularly, this month especially, with your credit card company to make sure there's nothing fishy going on. Any purchases you make, print off that confirmation sheet and read it. And don't give your credit card number until you know what all of the shipping and all of the charges are, because there are no legal limits on how much they can charge for shipping. So it may look like it's a wonderful deal, but they can make up the difference in shipping and exceed the difference. And if you want to return it, they can say, that's fine, but we don't refund shipping and handling. And so you can maybe get a small amount back, but not get back the majority of your purchase. So there are some really kind of scary things when you're online. It's wonderful for doing a lot of research, and we've all gotten accustomed to that. But boy, you don't really know who you're working with, and even though it looks like it may be coming out of Indiana or Ohio or Illinois or whatever, it can actually be coming from overseas, and there's some pretty bad guys out there.
Sure, yeah. I tend to try and stick with the merchants that I've shopped with in the past and have had good experiences with. And that has, so far, knock on this plastic table, worked out well for me. And I hope it continues to. But, you know, and also, you know, when it comes to giving a credit card number, there are secure ways and there are unsecure ways.
That's right.
And maybe you can address that a little bit.
Yes. The site that you're on, the URL at the top of the screen should have an S at the end of the HTTP. That means it's a secure site. So watch for that. If there's no S there, don't give them your card numbers or any important information. One other thing that has come up with just this last year is notices saying there's a problem with delivery. And I don't know if you've gotten any of those or not. I get a number of them, and they really are scams. And at this time of year, they're going to get to be more prevalent because so many people are ordering. I mean, they're very likely to get somebody say, oh, I ordered that item for my grandson, and I'll only see him in a week and a half, and I have to have it because then they go back home or whatever. So they know there are a lot of people that may fall for this. If you get a notice saying that there's been a problem with delivery, don't even click through on that. Go back to where you have placed orders and check with them through their customer service site on their website. These are scams or malicious emails that will simply either give you a virus or they will ask you to confirm something like a credit card number for the delivery and steal your identity. So that's something that was fairly new starting last year. And but, you know, and we all get a little frazzled at this time of year. So just make sure that you're not falling for that.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, of course, different from your original merchant saying, this item has been back ordered, do you want to continue to wait, or whatever.
Right.
So these that you're talking about then, Jo Ellen, what do they say is the delivery problem?
They're kind of obscure. You know, they're
Okay.
very vague because they really want to hit everybody
Sure.
and not say anything that's so specific that
Yeah.
you eliminate it immediately. So they'll say something like, there's been a problem with your delivery, this message is from FedEx or it's from UPS or whatever.
Okay.
And then please click on this or call this number to confirm your information.
I got a lot of those probably about a year or so ago from credit card companies, you know, and banks and things
Yes,
like that.
yes.
Those were the big scams and probably still are, although, you know, I haven't seen so many in the last maybe 6 months.
There have been some new rules on credit cards, and I think that has shut some of that down because
Yeah.
they're not allowed to market them to people under a certain age and that kind of thing, and like they used to.
Yeah, but these were coming from, they truly were like phishing scams. Like Bank of America was a big one, you know. They'd use Bank of America's logo and they'd use a URL address that looked like Bank of America.
Right.
But when you really looked closely at it and you'd look at some of the information at the bottom of that email, it didn't match up with Bank of America's actual website.
Right.
And, you know, so I mean, I have to say, probably if I hadn't done this show with some of the consumer protection folks, and our police department was very good about alerting people to that too, I might have very well clicked on something like that and been
It's
a
easy
victim.
to do, and
Yeah.
and the scammers can send out thousands of emails at almost no cost. I mean, this is just very simple. They can steal the logos from other websites. They can a high school kid can create a great-looking website, and they can just mass send these out. If 2 people or 3 people go for it,
Yeah.
it's great for them. This is really the new crime because it's much safer than sticking a gun in somebody's face. They're at a distance. They may well be overseas.
Yeah, and probably never get caught.
Right. Well,
know.
and that's why so many of the scams come from overseas. A lot of the scammers scamming us are in Canada. It doesn't mean Canadians are any more unethical than we are. Americans are probably scamming Canadians. But when you cross the border, law enforcement just has a harder time.
Yeah, it really does.
And so they're safer.
Yeah. Another one that that I got that was, and I got this about a year ago too, that seemed weird to me was from a foot product company selling shoes, and they sent this email saying, you know, your shoe order for such and such sneaker, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, I didn't order any sneakers. You know, that was the first clue that there was a problem.
Yes.
But then when I really started looking at where this email came from, they had used that same extension. You know, they basically just sent out these emails en masse to people who had that extension. Like if it's a yahoo.com thing, they would have sent that out to probably thousands or tens of thousands of people with the yahoo.com extension.
Right.
You know, and I thought, okay, I didn't even go any further with it. I just left it go. Didn't click on anything.
Right.
So.
And the place where this is really disturbing, I mean, that's disturbing, and people have to be smart and not fall for some of this. But with the economy down, one of the things that we see a lot of are approaches for debt renegotiation and for lowering interests on credit cards and that kind of thing. Again, many times they are pure scams, and they're going out to people who are pretty desperate. And when you're pretty desperate, sometimes you're not thinking as clearly, and you're hoping that maybe this is, you know, the answer from heaven to your problem.
Light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, and especially if you have financial troubles and you're looking for help in that way, avoid the ones that come to you on the internet, because you're most likely going to lose a whole lot more money and be in worse shape than you were.
Yeah.
And it's really sad.
Yeah.
You know, we love it when people call our office, and they can call our office anytime, Monday through Friday from 8:30 till 4, and they say, I just got this, what do you think about this? And we can steer them away from it. When they call and say, I just sent money off, you know, there are very few times that money is recoverable.
Sure.
It's usually gone.
We've been putting up, at least I think they have, the website address for the Wisconsin Better Business Bureau, but what is your office's phone number?
Our office phone number is 920-734-4352.
Okay, 920-734-4352. Okay, excellent. We'll give that out a few more times too during the hour. So you mentioned return policies if you're buying something on the internet. Return policies in stores is also a very, very important thing to know, isn't it? Because it's changed.
It has changed
over the years.
And it's actually gotten much more liberal and much more open with most companies. But that doesn't mean it's that way with everybody. So don't make the assumption that because one company says you can return anything, anytime, that everybody is doing that. And if somebody buys something that's a duplicate or the wrong size or whatever, make sure you know what your options are and how you can return it and whether you need the receipt or you don't need the receipt and all of that. Just be careful.
So it's probably a smart idea before you even make the purchase to say, what's your return policy? How long do I have?
Right.
You know, what if this is a gift? Should I hang on to the receipt? And a restocking charge. This is something that we're starting to see more and more of.
That's true. That's true.
Mostly I've seen it on like electronic type items, but I imagine it can be on almost any kind of an item.
It can be on any item. And very specifically, you should ask that question because these are gifts. And as far as the time for returning the policy, if this is a gift, if you buy it tomorrow morning and they say they have a 3-week return policy, and they probably have more than that, but say they would say that, and it's a Christmas gift, you don't have 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So just make sure that things are clearly stated and you know. And shop with the local merchants too. That's always good. People you know.
Yep, I agree. I agree. Gift cards. That's, you know, we're seeing more and more people who give gift cards.
Right.
They're easy. People love them.
Right.
You know, they love to give them and people love to receive them. But there are some things that we can do to make that experience wiser and more pleasurable too, right?
Right. 2 years ago, there was a problem that gift cards, thieves would go and they would reveal the code on the back of the card, jot it down, and then wait until you activated the card and then go and clean the card off. That is happening less because almost all of the gift cards have something you have to scratch off. So they can't just see it in the store without making it obvious that they've damaged the card. So that has gotten better. But keep in mind, the stores love gift cards too. And the stores love them because I think it's 30% of them never get turned back in.
It's millions of dollars.
It's millions
that aren't getting used.
Yes. So if you give a gift card, make sure that you're giving it to someone who's going to keep track of it and make use of it. I have a relative in my family who never cashes birthday checks and stuff. I think the gift cards would end up in the same place. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm not sure a gift card there is a good idea.
Maybe just give cash in a case like that. Would they use the cash, Jo Ellen?
I think they would. But,
okay, well, there you go.
Unless it would stay in the card and get lost someplace, I don't know. Just one family member that does this. But so gift cards are good. They are somewhat limiting. And the other option is to get a prepaid debit card. And that's okay, but keep in mind many of those have fees, whereas the gift cards, you pay $25 for a gift card, it's worth $25. On the debit cards, ask what those fees are. Ask if there are transaction fees, ATM fees, whatever, and make sure. There was just the thing on the news the other day about the Kardashian girls sponsoring a card that had horrendous fees.
It was really, I mean, it was outrageous.
Right. And that may be fine for them with their money, but for most of us, we should know what it is.
Well, they actually backed off from that real fast.
They did.
They're trying to get out of that deal, actually. I don't know how that's going to play out, but
that's right.
Yeah, sometimes these fees, I mean, it really can wipe you out.
Right,
you know, to the point where you never even get to, you don't have any money left to spend on a purchase.
And gift cards used to be somewhat that way because if you didn't use them, they would start to charge a monthly fee just for you holding it, and it could just eat up the card after a while. And they put some new laws into effect within the last year that changed some of that. So that was good. But gift cards are great. Make sure it hasn't been tampered with, and if you get them, put them in a secure place and make sure you use them.
Sure, sure. You know, and something else, I mean, by the time this airs, some people will probably be pulling things out of layaway, but, you know, if, you know, there are complaints that I'm sure your office routinely hears on layaways, that they've laid something away and for whatever reason, they run into a problem with the merchant. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Again, with a layaway, know what their policies are before you do it. Layaway is something that's come back. I mean, in the 70s, it was pretty common.
It was, yeah.
And then it went
prevalent.
away.
Yeah.
And I think with the credit cards and stuff, people just thought, well, I don't need to do that. I'll just put it on my card and build up this balance. And now people trying to be a little more frugal are seeing that as a good method. It's a good method if you know that you can make the payments that are required, and you know that if you can't, you can get out of it and get a refund for what you've put into it. It's, you know, the business is going to probably keep a piece of it because they have held that item for you.
Sure.
But know what it is and know what you're getting into. Again, don't just assume that this is an open-ended deal and that you can just withdraw all of your money if something goes wrong.
Sure, sure. What are the things that you know, are happening at this time of year when people are doing their Christmas shopping that you think people should be aware of?
Well, there are lots of crowds, for one thing. When you're using your credit card, whether it's at the grocery store or at the mall or wherever, make sure nobody's shoulder surfing and watching you put debit card pins into machines and that kind of thing. Somebody talking on a cell phone right behind you may actually not be talking on the cell phone. They may be taking a picture of your card. There are some things, you know, we get busy and distracted and it's very easy. But keep in mind, when it comes to identity theft and stealing this information, over half the time, we ourselves are losing our information.
Sure.
But maybe less than half the time, but a lot, whether it's the government or, you know, losing our social security numbers or publishing them in the wrong place, it happens. Most of us, and I do this to be honest, hand a credit card to a waitress at a restaurant and she walks into the back with it. They could easily copy those numbers. We all are vulnerable. So check your credit report, keep track of things, kind of know what's going on. If something sounds fishy, if you get turned down for a loan for a reason that doesn't make sense to you, or turned down in opening a credit card, do some background checking, because the sooner you catch that stuff, the better off you will be. It's a little less work, but it's a nightmare, and we're all subject to the possibility.
Sure. Okay. This is also the time of year when people are going to be thinking about going to the Rose Bowl and so forth.
Yes.
And I just got a press release from your office, as a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, talking about Rose Bowl tickets and scams. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. What people are scamming now with Rose Bowl tickets?
Well, they scam whenever there's something that creates kind of a mass frenzy. When there's a feeding frenzy, the scammers are out there exploiting it. So there are a lot of people that are going to be wanting to go to the Rose Bowl game. Maybe people who don't have a regular travel agent that they use on a regular basis that they trust. And they're going to want to get a good deal. But be very cautious, because I believe what we said in the press release was that in 1994, 10,000 people in Wisconsin were scammed with tickets to the Rose Bowl. And not only have you just purchased a counterfeit ticket that's not going to get you into the game, but you've spent airfare and hotel and restaurant money. You know, the ticket is probably a third of what you've put into all of this. And even if law enforcement or somebody could find the person that cheated you on the ticket, you're not getting the rest of it back.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So it can be a pretty expensive loss and very disappointing to get family members all excited and out to California and then discover you're sitting in a hotel room watching it on a TV that's smaller than the one you have at home.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's true.
So be very cautious and make sure you're working with a reputable ticket dealer. Check to see if they're accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Check to see if they have other trust marks on their website and follow through and double check those. If you get a notice and you're going through eBay or Craigslist, get pictures of the tickets ahead of time. Now, my hesitation on that is I'm not sure I would know what a legitimate versus a counterfeit ticket would look like.
Yeah.
So unless you're pretty well informed, that may not be enough. Take those ticket numbers and compare them back to the seating chart for the stadium to make sure that that seat actually exists. If they're kind of a sloppy counterfeiter, they may get caught there. But really check them out. Get the full name and address of the person you're buying it from so that you know who they really are, not just their sales name on eBay or whatever, but who they are and where they are. If you get it through Craigslist, work locally. Don't do it at a distance because you really have no protections. And if you're going to meet somebody to do this exchange, meet in a very public place because you're probably carrying cash. They probably want you to pay in cash. And you are setting yourself up to be robbed. So be very cautious about all of that. And that's true of any Craigslist item, actually. You know, kind of be cautious about where you go to pick up the item.
Oh, it just makes it so scary, doesn't it?
I know it. It's exhausting.
I mean, you know, don't you just miss the days when there weren't all these people out there ripping people off, and you know, you could trust who you were doing business with?
Right. The time, you know, it's not the times when the person who put your roof on you ran into at church or the grocery store or the hardware store. I mean, these were people that lived down the street and kind of had to take care of you, or else all the neighbors would know.
Yeah.
We're dealing with people that come in from other areas of the country, and we're dealing on the internet with people overseas. It's not the nice little, you know, 1950s world that it once was.
Yeah.
And so, and the only person that really can protect you is you.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if we don't have folks like you giving us information, then in a lot of cases, we don't even know how to protect ourselves.
Right, right. And that's what we can help with. We really do spend a lot of our time taking phone calls from people and just helping answer questions. And even if it's something that we can't handle ourselves, we will give you a referral to what organization can help you. So we work very hard to never send anybody away without some step forward.
Okay. Anything else on either the Rose Bowl tickets or tickets in general, I suppose? All those things would apply to any kind of tickets that you're buying, whether it's a concert or a football game.
Right.
Anything else on that or on holiday shopping before we kind of move on to some other general things?
I think we've covered most of it. If anybody has any questions, again, they can call our office and I will answer, or one of my assistants will answer, and they're very helpful. But I think we've pretty much covered the holiday shopping.
All right, excellent. Well, you mentioned putting roofs on, and of course, contractors, especially after there's been a disaster, like whether it be a hurricane if you live in the southern states, or around here a tornado, or just heavy windstorms.
Right.
You know, when there's been something of a monumental proportion, you tend to have people coming into the area from other parts of the country.
Right.
And, or one of the two, sometimes both, you have other people just popping up who live in the area and who really don't have the skills necessary to make those kinds of home repairs and such. So contracting, I don't want to call them scams, but contracting deals and contracts that have gone bad, I'm sure you hear a lot about in your office.
That's one of our top complaints. What people mostly know us for is our complaint process and home improvement issues, because it's your biggest investment. It's a situation where it's hard to do a roof right. I mean, it's really hard to get all those valleys done and get everything totally waterproofed and fixed. We had our roof done several years ago, and the contractor came back 5 times to take care of it. We were very lucky. He was a very good contractor, and he took care of us. If you have somebody who really doesn't quite know what he's doing and there are problems, he's going to be difficult to find because he doesn't know how to fix this. And if he's unethical, he's just going to take your money and run and not be there to take care of it. So we rate companies on the Better Business Bureau website. We give them grades of A+ to F. And you can just go into our website, which is wisconsin.bbb.org, and you can type in, it says search for a business or charity, and you can just type in the name of the company that you're thinking about working with, and you can see whether they have taken care of problems or have not taken care of problems. We will give you the information, how many complaints they've had, how they've resolved the complaints, whether they've not answered them, whether they've not resolved them but have answered them, whether they have taken care of the customer even though the customer may not still be happy, which is what we call administratively judged resolved, or whether everybody's happy and it's a resolved complaint. And their grade will reflect that. It will also reflect how much information we have on the company.
Sure.
So check out a company before you sign the contract and make sure that you're working with somebody who, if something goes wrong, they'll be there to take care of it.
Yeah. I've even known people, and from them I've learned to sometimes do this. I've actually checked a company out on CCAP too to see if they've been sued, you know,
That's right.
for work that hasn't been done properly or what have you. You know, and unfortunately, it used to be that you could just go by word of mouth reference from someone, and that still works pretty well. But every once in a while, you hear about, you know, they've done a great job for this person, but they've done a lousy job for this person. And I don't know how that can be, if it's just one person has less standards than someone else, or the other person just has overly set standards.
Or one project just went well, and one project didn't. Do check their references. And the word of mouth, I'm going to distinguish here between word of mouth, which is from somebody you may know, a neighbor, whatever, friend, relative, and testimonials on a website or testimonials. Testimonials can be totally faked. I wouldn't have a whole lot of confidence in that. Word of mouth from a neighbor or a friend is better. And then just back it up and check them, as you said, at our website, at CCAP. Consumer Protection also can give some information. You can call them.
If you can reach them. See, that's the problem, though, and I don't want to diss them, Jo Ellen, but I really, just in trying to call to get someone on this show, I got caught up in this, like I said, this automated phone thing, and you know, it says to get such and such a person or such and such an office, push such and such, and you do that, and you end up getting right back to the same original message. I got so frustrated. I found literally no way to get through to a human being. And you know, I had to end up in one of my own situations. I did end up filing a complaint online against a merchant, but I know that it took a long time to get that resolved, and I've heard from other people that it's taken them an incredibly long amount of time too, and with no resolution, really. So, and I wanted to point out the difference too before we talk about some of these other things. You know, this is a great service that the Better Business Bureau has. You don't have any legal powers to make a merchant do anything, whereas the consumer protection people have legal power behind them. But since this change has happened, they don't seem to be exercising their legal powers against any merchants.
It's a government that's a little overwhelmed right now, and I think that's
so,
the problem.
So that sort of weakens their position, I think.
It does.
And elevates yours, you know.
We have influence. Companies that don't want to have an F on our website will work with us and will try to do what's fair with the consumers. There are some companies that simply don't care. And that's another good reason to kind of avoid them if you're looking for someone to do business with. Because what we want to be is, we want companies to answer complaints. Not because they should be beholden to us, but because a consumer came to us and asked for our help. And we are giving them the opportunity and trying to open kind of a door of communication here that allows them to take care of the consumer. The consumer, we ask the consumer to call the company directly first and try to resolve the problem. And most of the time the consumers have done that. There are times when consumers just don't really want to do that.
They don't want confrontation.
They don't want confrontation. They'd rather we did that. And we will still send that on. And if you resolve it in a way that the BBB ultimately determines was fair, that does not mean giving your firstborn child to the consumer. But if you do what is fair, it will not affect your grade at all. It will report that there was a complaint, but you know, things go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not unusual. It's not if you have a complaint, it's how you handle it. But some of the criticism is that why would a huge company say, respond to us? Because we are trying to help one of your customers. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and ultimately, it helps them too.
yes, it does.
You know, because you know as well as I do, a bad experience with a company travels much faster amongst people than a good experience.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right. What do they say? You tell 20 people of a bad experience and 1 or 2 about a good experience? Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And so that bad word of mouth,
Yeah.
you know, it's better that they just try and resolve it
Right.
however they can, you know.
And to be honest, we find that if something goes wrong and a company really works to take care of it, that ultimately impresses the consumer almost more than just a good experience that flowed smoothly. I mean, I talked about my roof. I mean, I was really impressed. They came back 5 times.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it was taken care of. They took care of us. I mean, that impresses me, and I think that impresses other people too. So sometimes problems are actually opportunities.
Well, you know, and in the case of your roof, you know, it might not have even been their problem. It might have
Right.
been materials that just weren't right, and of course they're not manufacturing those materials. They're coming from someone else. You know,
It's the way the window met with the roofing, because we have kind of a funny house with a dormery window thing in it. and it really wasn't, honestly, their problem that had created the problem, or their work that had created, but they ultimately stuck with it and took care of it.
Sure. So when we're talking about working with home improvement contractors,
Right.
Jo Ellen, what are some, I know that the state has and I know I've kind of badmouthed the state a little bit here. Not really badmouthed them, I've said the truth about it, but they do have a lot of good information on their website. I will say that much. There's a tremendous amount of terrific information on Consumer Protection's website, and there are some laws that speak specifically to home improvement contractors.
Right.
Things that must be in a contract, such as a start date and a completion date.
Right.
So maybe you can just kind of give folks an overview of what things they should be making sure of excuse
right.
me, are in a contract. And you do that, and I'm going to take some water here.
Okay. Well, check out the company and get at least 3 estimates. Home improvement, again, it's your biggest investment, your home. Make sure that you are getting competitive bids, and don't always think that the lowest bid is the best bid, because you want quality as well as price. Beware of the traveling contractors. If somebody shows up at your driveway and says, oh, I have some leftover blacktop, tell them to go away. And that's not the way to get something done. And we just hear nightmare stories all the time about whether it's just thin down black paint that they put on there that doesn't last a week, or whether they take your money and go and may not start. If they start, they don't finish the job. So use somebody who has a location that you can get back to if there's a problem, and that you know who you're working with. Make sure that they're licensed, particularly if they need to pull a permit for doing the job. If a contractor asks you to pull the permit for doing a job, instead of having them pull the municipal permit that may be needed, that means that if something goes wrong and it's not done to code, it is your responsibility, not the contractor's, to fix it. And as homeowners, we don't really know what those codes are.
Right.
So make sure that they are pulling the contract. And in order for them to pull a contract, they must have, to work on a dwelling, to do anything that requires pulling a contract, they have to have both a dwelling contractor's license and a dwelling qualifier license.
Okay.
So and you can check on the Department of Commerce website and make sure that they are listed and that they're licenses. If they have the cards and they're typed up and they have the expiration date and they're within that, you're probably fine. But you can also go on and double check those things nowadays, which is very nice. Make sure they're insured. You don't, the last thing anybody wants is somebody up on your roof falling off, a worker, and getting hurt. I mean, and you being the person responsible for his injuries and taking care of him. They should have workman's compensation insurance through the business that hires the employee and covers him. Your homeowners should not be coming. You don't want to be fighting that battle. It's just, who wants to fight that? I mean,
Right.
and you just don't want to be there. So make sure that you're safe there. Make sure they're bonded and licensed. If the contractor suggests that you work with a specific lender to pay for this project, to take out a loan, double check and compare those rates with your bank or your credit union and other lenders that you can find on your own. Don't just assume that it's going to be the best deal. And again, check out the lender and make sure that they're good. One of the most important things is the mechanic's lien.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of a project, you should not pay the final payments until you have what's called a lien release on all of the subcontractors that were used on your project. You have a general contractor, he's hired an electrician and he's hired a plumber and he's hired a carpenter and all of these people, and he's ordered supplies from one of the big stores, whoever, and you want to make sure that you get something from all of them saying they have been paid before you get paid. We came this close personally to being stung by that one. We had a kitchen done about 20 years ago, and there were some problems at the end, but it all got done. We read in the newspaper that the next job they did after ours, the company went bankrupt and the people had to pay for their kitchen twice. They had paid the general contractor the entire amount, but they had paid none of the subcontractors. And all of the subcontractors came back, and because you have the product, they are allowed to sue you, and you have to pay twice.
That is just awful, and I understand where that supplier is coming from, but you know, it just seems like there ought to be a law. And that's one of those things, there ought to be a law, you know?
Yep. And the logic is that the supplier has some recourse if they can come to you because the guy's gone bankrupt and he's gone. So it's, you can understand it from the supplier's side, but from the homeowner's side, you just have to be so smart. We actually have a little brochure in our office that we've put together. I'll give you one.
Oh, thank you.
And if anybody would like one, give us a call and we can stick one in the mail to them, or they can come to our office. We also keep a lot of the Federal Trade Commission brochures in our office. The one on fair debt collection, on the do not call registry. We keep this stuff in our office, and if anybody wants to come and browse through and get some great free advice that you've already paid for with your taxes.
Terrific. Now, you had mentioned, you know, insurance, and I'm assuming that if you're going to hire a contractor to do flooring or a window or whatever the case may be, if you just ask them, and I've had this done, the contractor has their insurance company actually send us
a certificate of insurance.
A certificate of insurance, yes.
Yes.
Now, you had mentioned about bonding, though. Now, I've never asked for bonding, you know, if they were bonded or not, because I've always thought of bonding just as, you know, if they're going to be in my home, are they bonded if something turns up missing or whatever?
Right.
But I'm always right there when they're working.
Right.
They're never alone. So
it may
is
not
that
be so
that
important,
or
it
is
may
it
not
still
be that
something
important
I should be asking for?
if you're going to be there all the time and you know where they're going to be. But if you are literally turning over a home full of contents and walking away, you may want to check on bonding.
So if they're going to be alone in your home for, you know, even more
Right.
than 5 minutes, it might not be a bad idea.
Right. Or if
Okay.
there are a lot of them. I mean, if there
Okay.
are going to be a lot of workers that are kind of wandering around and you can't obviously keep an eye on everybody, you're probably doing your dishes or, you know, balancing your checkbook or whatever. And if they're in different areas of your house, then I would be a little more cautious and ask for the bonding.
Okay, all right. Okay, you mentioned the do not call list, and I know that this is something more that the state and federal government have done. Consumer Protection really kind of took the lead on this from a state standpoint. But there's a couple of things that you have here that I'm sure you can share with our viewers on do not call registries.
Right. And probably the most important, we had a call today concerning a do not call violation. And the woman called up and she was just up to her ears. She was so fed up. Someone had called about a business, a local business, trying to sell her something. She said, "Have you not heard of the do not call list? I'm on the do not call list." And the person just kind of brushed it off and was not serious. And ultimately, I think she hung up on them or whatever. She called us and she gave me the phone number. And I did a little research and found, and it looked like it was a residence. Well, what we discovered was that, because she then went back and called the number back, thinking that maybe this was somebody working at home doing calls for a business to get some sales.
Sure.
And what we discovered was that it really was a scam, a straight scam, and they had simply copied some poor resident's phone number and used that as what they put on caller ID. They can fake what you see on caller ID. It may not be accurate. So don't necessarily believe it if it's on there. That also left her with no way to file a complaint, because the only information she had was the caller ID. And they were kind of unclear about things. And if they had mentioned the company, she had not remembered it. So, but at any rate, you can, if caller ID is accurate, and write it down and try, but you can visit donotcall.gov and you can file a complaint there, and you can also sign up for the registry if you haven't done it. Many of us have done it, so so that's probably you know, preaching to the choir here. But you can also go in and file a complaint. Now, the political calls, which thank goodness are over for a while.
Only for a few months.
That's
yet,
right.
And then the
They start again.
Local elections start up.
And charities are not controlled by do not call, so we will continue to get those. But if it's a for-profit business calls and you're on the do not call list, you can report that.
Can I just ask one question, though? Even though the political calls, because I kept getting called from a lobbying organization, and I told them, I said, you know, yes, I'm on the do not call list, and I realize that they're not selling me anything, but in a way, I feel they are. They're trying to sell their propaganda to me. But I just said, I don't want any more of these calls from you. Take me off your list. You can ask them to just be removed from that list, and they have to abide by that, do they?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Now, the thing is that you may tell that to one lobbying organization, and another one could call you. So it should work if they are an ethical organization.
Well, this one wasn't so much. Well, I'm sure they think they're ethical, but they just continued to call. And after about the 10th or 11th call, I got fed up. And I called them right back, and I said, if you call this number one more time, I will be having my attorney call you. And, you know, I mean, I hated to have to do that, but, you know, you just don't want these calls all the time.
Right.
And they come at the most inconvenient times, like always.
Yes.
You know, Murphy's Law, and just in such rapid succession, it seems.
Right.
And they're so annoying because if they get an answering machine or a voicemail, they'll hang up on it and then they'll call back. This one time they called 3 times within probably an hour and a half to 2 hour span.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, get over this already, you know?
Right.
And so they finally, thank God, never called me again. And I'm sure that they were in their office calling me a few names, just as I was sitting in my office calling them a few names. But, you know, I think that's the key. You just tell them, take me off your list, and hopefully they will.
Right, right.
You know?
Yeah, it's irritating, and it's kind of heartbreaking for us. We'll get senior citizens who are, you know, mostly mobile, but not very fast, and they'll say, you know, the phone rang and I had to come up from the basement, and then it's some robo call of some kind, and, you know, again, it's a different world. It's not, it's not like only our friends had our phone numbers.
Personally, I wish we could get some kind of legislation in this state to stop those robocalls at political time, because they do come at the worst times. And of course, they target that. They set those calls to come at those times because they know that's when you're going to be home.
That's right.
And you're going to be home having dinner and so forth. So, it's very strategically planned. Yeah. It's not a coincidence that they're calling it dinner time. Okay, good. Well, let's talk about a couple of other things here. We've talked, most of this stuff we talked about falls under the general topic of scams and schemes.
Right.
Identity theft. Yeah. Identity theft is a huge one.
Right.
You got phishing, you got vishing,
snishing.
all these little names,
Yep.
But it's all for scam, and it's all to get access to our hard-earned dollars.
Right.
Talk to us about identity theft. What kinds of complaints does your office see?
We don't, those end up, by the time identity theft happens, it's really a legal issue. So we actually don't get a lot of complaints about them because these are actual thieves and there's not much we can do. We can warn you ahead of time and help, but if it's happened, you need to work with law enforcement, you need to work with your credit card companies, your banks, and get everything, and the credit reporting agencies, and make sure that you're doing all of that. So it's not like we get complaints, but we do get a lot of concern. We have a free shredding day twice a year where people can bring their documents and professional shredding company will destroy it responsibly so people can get rid of it. We encourage people to buy a shredder and make sure that they throw everything away. One thing that I've encouraged lately, and maybe I'm being overly paranoid on this, I don't know, but...
Well, given what you do for a living, Jo Ellen, I understand that.
But even your catalogs that you get in the mail that have your customer number on them, many of those, if it's a company that you use regularly, they have your credit card in the file. So it might be wise to even shred that mailing label that has your customer number on it.
Now, see, you're giving me something else to do when I get home, because this time of year especially, you get so many catalogs from places. So I've been just sort of tossing them in my recycle box. Now I got to go home and
rip the label off.
Take those off and put them through my shredder. But that's a good piece of advice, though.
I just, and most companies probably wouldn't allow something to happen, but they're busy and you don't know what's going to slip through. So be pretty cautious about that. And senior citizens get phone calls asking to confirm things, the phishing, the, whatever. Do not give anybody who calls you any private information, credit card numbers, bank account numbers, nothing. If they call you, assume, and they're asking for that kind of information, assume they are bad and do not give it to them. If they say they're from your bank and there's a problem, say, fine, I will call my bank directly. Go to the phone book or to the internet listing on the bank's website, call the phone number there and ask the bank if there's a problem. But, once they get chatting with you, you kind of forget that they called you.
Yeah.
But don't forget that, and make sure that anybody who calls you, you do not share any information with, because it's just not worth it. It's such a headache. So we just have to be cautious. And the senior citizens are so susceptible to this because they just assume everybody's nice. Yeah. And that, oh, the bank must really need it. And they don't. Or
they really want to help me. Isn't that nice that they've called me?
Yeah.
That's, I'm sure, what they're thinking. So, and those of us who are younger, we're just, I think, naturally suspicious about a lot of things, probably more so than we should be. But, I guess I'd rather err on the side of caution and suspicion.
That's right. In this day and age, you're better off being a bit suspicious and making somebody prove themselves to you before you share information.
You mentioned earlier, and I want to go back to this for just a moment, you mentioned about the people who might come to your door trying to sell leftover asphalt or cement or whatever that they've had supposedly from a job that they didn't use it all on. Along that same line, I had this happen to me last summer. Some guy came up, and I've seen his truck around in other parts of the neighborhood. In the city, he comes around and says that they've got some leftover meat. Well, leftover from what? You
of
know?
all the things to get left over.
Yeah, yeah. They bought too much meat or whatever the case may
Right.
be, but they've got this meat left over. And, you know, did I want some high quality premium steaks and this, that, and the other? Of course, I would never buy some. I mean, unless it's like Schwann's or some reputable company like
Right.
that, I'm not going to be buying something off of a truck like that. But have you heard of this kind of thing?
Yes.
And what's the deal with these folks?
We've had some serious complaints about those. Sometimes the meat is really bad quality.
Okay.
I mean, just because
As
he
opposed
says
to high
it's-
quality
yeah,
premium meat.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can't believe what they're saying all the
That's
time.
right.
Sometimes the prices end up being outrageously high, not low at all. I would not buy meat from somebody who showed up at my door. Again, as you say, if you have a deal or want to set up a deal with something like Schwann's, who is a regular deliverer and has quality that you can depend on, then that's one thing. But somebody who just shows up, you honestly don't know if that's even safe.
Well, that's true. You know.
You know, I would not buy that at all. And the lower the price, the more I would be concerned about whether it's safe. But we have had a lot of complaints about that, and complaints about prices being just terribly high for what they ended up getting. I mean, it kind of sounds good at first, and then the spouse will come home and say, "You paid how much for what?" And they kind of look at the poundage and the types of meat and discover that, you know, sometimes they can talk fast enough to confuse you.
Yeah. Well, you know, we don't these days have too many people coming to our doors like we used to, because laws have, of course, cracked down on a lot of this stuff. But there are still the vacuum cleaner salesmen, and
Right.
I think a lot of these people are working off referrals, but it's still the same thing. They're still coming to your home to sell you something.
Right, right.
And there is something known as the 3-day cooling off period. I don't know that that's the official technical
Yes,
term,
it
but
is.
okay, excellent. Talk to us a little about that and
Okay.
what's involved with
The
that.
3-day cooling off period is actually very limited. Many of us, you know, have heard of it, but it's not very clear. It does not cover anything under $25.
Okay.
It only covers goods and services that are intended for personal or family use, and it does not cover things that are made orders that are made on internet or phone. It only covers things that you order at a place that is not the regular place of business of the business. So if the vacuum cleaner salesman comes to your door and sells you a vacuum, you have 3 days to cool off and cancel that order. Now, you have to tell them, and you should tell them in writing, and I would send a certified letter. It's 3 business days, by the way. And I would also call them, but sometimes they're pretty hard to find because they really don't want this back. They have your money and they want to keep your money and they don't want the item back. The item also has to be in condition as good as when it was delivered, so it can't be damaged or filthy or whatever. So be very cautious. It does not cover emergency home repairs. It does not cover automobiles. There is no 3-day cooling off period if you go buy a used car someplace and then discover it has huge problems. So, you know, we get calls like that all the time. Don't I have 3 days to change my mind? No,
Yeah.
you don't.
So just real quickly then, is this different from the 3-day right to rescind that we always would hear about?
I believe it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Good companies will have the form printed. Your contract will give you a statement about how to do the 3-day cooling off period, but you don't need that. If you send a letter certified to their address and you call them, I mean, the calling should not be necessary, but I would do it anyway to cover myself.
Okay.
And tell them where they can pick up the item, then that is sufficient, and you should be able to do that.
Okay, all right, very good. So many things that we could still cover, but that's why we're going to have you back a few more times.
That sounds great.
A couple times throughout the year, I think, would be appropriate. So,
Great.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's great
And as
fun.
always, thanks to all of you, and we will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.